Hello and welcome to the Rooted Woman Project. I am so excited to share with you one of the sweetest, most amazing people I know. Her name is Allison, and she is here to support the burnt out lights of the world. She is a certified coach, Reiki Master, and a boundaries specialist. She works with people pleasers to help them feel more confident, standing up for themselves, working on mindset, energy, and what I think is so important, how to navigate all of that in real life situations. So today we are going to be talking about what people pleasing is, what it means to be a highly sensitive person, how to set boundaries, and how to work with your energy and your mindset all around doing that.
All my favorite things.
Right? Like so
Yay.
many amazing things. So this project is dedicated to gathering together the ancient and modern wisdom being shared by the women who nourish the world. And I can't think of anything more nourishing than supporting people in coming back to themselves, coming home to themselves. And one of the things I love about what you do, Allison, is that you don't just kind of share the philosophy or the ideas around it, but you give these really tangible tools to actually support people out in the world, right? Because I feel like it's so easy to get in these spaces where you're like, oh, and like hypotheticals and imagining.
Yeah, this is what I would do. This is how I
Right.
would react. It's like, would
Yeah.
you? Would
Yeah.
I? I don't know.
Yeah. So welcome to the space. I would love to just leave some time here for you to share a little bit about your journey and kind of coming to this
Yeah,
space and sharing
totally.
tools.
Totally. Well, hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here and just to have this conversation. Like I said, these are my favorite topics. So my experience with people pleasing and kind of how it connects to what I do now, basically I had such a big heart when I was a little kid. And I
Mhm.
didn't know what to do with it. I was very sensitive. I was always worried about people. I was always just very like, how do I help others? Focused on others.
Mhm.
And I grew up with that. I was putting other people first, being good, being nice, being the teacher's pet, checking all the boxes. Um, and every once in a while, I would have this like, I've always had this like confident wild streak that would
Mhm.
come out, and I would like sometimes just be like, yeah, and like really powerful, really stand up for myself, just really like, cracking everybody up because I was being so goofy and like in my essence. And
Oh.
then I would, dampen it back down.
Mm.
And that pattern
Mhm.
became really apparent once I graduated college. I had studied psychology and conflict transformation, which
Mm.
was like a very cool, gave me a lot of the tools for the real world
Mhm.
scenarios with people.
Mhm.
But I realized kind of coming out of that, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I sort of just did what I thought I should do and like went and got an office job and kind
Wow.
of fell into that world and was like, this is what I'm doing, and just kind of kept continuing to people please and do what I thought I was supposed to.
Mhm.
Um, and I just felt my like sparkle being
Mm.
rubbed away. And I was just
Yeah.
like sitting there, like looking at like a Panera lunch and being like, this
Oh.
has got to be more. There's got to be
Yeah.
more. Um,
Yeah.
and like so wonderfully at that point, I started really going to the gym a lot, and I met a lot
Uh-huh.
of personal trainers and
Uh-huh.
like nutrition people who really showed me like, wait a second, you can have a job where you have this like freedom, and
Uh-huh.
you can also like help people. And so that kind of introduced me to the world of coaching, which then I jumped into. Very long story short, people pleasing was also to my detriment there, trying to
Mm.
start a business and just like being constantly worried about what other people think.
Yeah.
What will my mom think of this if I post it online? What will my friends think? Who am I to think I can have this beautiful life? And all of that kind of came in, which really stalled a lot of progress for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, like full transparency of the story, it did land me in inpatient mental health care for a
Yeah.
period of time because it was just like I was so burnt out. I was
Yeah.
so disconnected from myself.
Yeah.
Because I had spent all of this life, my whole life, like performing to
Hmm.
fit the box of other people, and then was like, I don't know who Allison is. Like, I've never stopped. I'm scared to stop and like ask that question.
Right.
Um, and
Mm.
once I kind of got into that mental health care and started, seeing a therapist and learning, like, okay, it can be safe to meditate. It can be safe to sit with myself. Let's do some healing to kind of learn this. And that really helped me see like how much my life had been for other people and like through the lens of how they were perceiving me.
Right.
And so that, yeah, once I realized that, I also kind of realized the message that it
Hmm.
was sending to other people about me. Like I
Mm.
was kind of giving them this message of like, you're superior, you can tell me what to do, you can boss me around, I'll always be there for you. um but I also realized what message that was giving myself of
Mm.
like, you are inferior,
Right.
other people are better. And
Yep.
like, to borrow the phrase from the internet, like once you know, like once you learn, you can't not know that.
Right.
I had that
Right.
realization and was like, whoa, I'm telling other people and myself that
Yeah.
they are like inherently better than me.
Wow.
And I can't vibe with that. And that wild streak came back and
Mm.
I just let it keep coming back. And
Mhm.
here we are.
Oh my gosh, thank God for the whole for the wild streak.
Mhm.
Wow, I got chills like multiple times as you were talking because I feel like I can so deeply resonate with your journey. And I'm curious, like two things.
Mhm.
One was like at the beginning when you said like, and I sometimes I take notes. So if I look
Yeah,
down, it's like
go
what I'm
for it.
saying.
Go for it.
Um, you said at the beginning that like, you would, people please and be the teacher's pet and like kind of like do what you needed to do for other people, but occasionally you would kind of bounce out and let it out and share your sparkle, but then you would kind of start to go and kind of temper it again. Was
Mhm.
there like a particular thought that came in that made you feel like you had to tamper it? Was it like, did the fear and
Yeah.
anxiety come in?
Um, yeah, and unfortunately, I feel like it was an external message in
Uh-huh.
this case of like, teachers or parents or family members are being like, "Hey,"
Uh-huh.
and this is like a phrase that kind of sticks out is like, "Don't let your spotlight like cast a shadow."
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and so it was like, don't be too big and bold because it makes other people feel bad.
Yep.
And so I kind of was like, oh, okay.
Which
But it felt
exacerbates
good.
the,
And yeah, it felt natural to like be in that version of
yeah,
myself. But then there was always this like, don't be too big, don't
right.
draw attention. Don't like, dye
Uh-huh.
your hair purple. Which my
Right.
hair is purple now, so whatever. But you
Which I
know,
feel like just reinforces that message of again gauging your light and your expression off of what other people how they might respond.
right, right.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, that's big to hear, especially at a as a child,
Mhm.
because you really
Yeah.
take that to
Yeah,
heart.
I think I was probably like coming into my like teens at
Uh-huh.
that point too, which was like also such a detrimental time of like identifying like who I am. And it
Yeah.
was just kind of like as soon as I was stepping into that, I was getting this message of like,
Whoa,
okay, but
yeah.
like don't be too big. And then also friends being like, I remember so many times I would show up in like what I thought was an awesome outfit.
Yeah.
And my friends, quote unquote, would be like, what are you wearing? And it was just like, I think I look amazing. But I would like
Yeah,
let them like
right.
kind of like, oh, maybe it is wrong. Maybe I am like not quite good enough to like take up this much space.
Right. Especially at that age, because teenage years is so about image.
Right.
It's so all about like, but that's where I think society gets it wrong because it is a time for external creative expression. It's this beautiful time of kind of coming into yourself and like
Totally.
having a voice and having an opinion. And so often it's like, oh, but that doesn't fit the norm. So you're weird,
Right.
or you're on the outside, or that's not okay.
Right. It's like you can have your opinion, but like still within permission of
Yeah,
like what is accepted.
exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. And then there was another thing that you said later when you were like saying how, and this I think is also a really big thing, like when you could really realize that you are living for what's going on outside, And so much of who you are is made up of that, that you don't know who you are in the inside. Like you don't know what you want. You don't know what you need. You don't know how you feel about things because for so long your opinion has been shaped by outside influences.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think the tools you do are really interesting that I know we'll get to later, but it's like, if you've been attached to this way of acting from a people pleaser standpoint as a way of keeping and maintaining that connection, then to
Mm-hmm.
separate from that behavior and self-identify implies a separation,
Yeah.
which can feel
100%.
terrifying,
Totally.
right? Which
And
totally,
like, can I just add a bonus to that?
yeah,
Not only are you like stepping away from like yourself in some ways, but you're also like, it requires like teaching people to treat you in a new way. And
yeah,
so there's also this bonus piece of like, okay, I'm stepping into this new version. I'm leaving this old version of me behind in many ways.
yeah,
And I'm also like going to teach other people to like catch up with me. So
yeah,
that's why I always like tell people on this journey, like give yourself grace, like realize how many levels of like unlearning and relearning
yeah,
you're doing here. Like
right.
whenever people are like, help me just like fix it really quick. I'm like, okay, well, we have to understand like there are levels. And like once you know, it does like bring it like, okay, we can get through this, but there's definitely some layers to
Yeah,
it. Sorry to interrupt.
absolutely. And like the what like the labyrinth cycle of it, right? Like you might get closer to it sometimes and then you get further away
Mhm.
and then you get closer to it. So for those watching who maybe aren't familiar, like I know for me, I heard the term highly sensitive person for a
Mhm.
long time. And I'm like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be
Mhm.
highly sensitive? What does it mean? Like, what are the
Mhm.
qualities that you might see in someone's life that would maybe lend to this particular?
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And this is something that I just wrote a piece of content on it on my Instagram that is like a list of like ways to kind of I realize that you might be an empath. And
Mhm.
one of the things I noticed while I was like writing the copy for it, and somebody echoed this sentiment in the comments as well, was that for so long I was like, I don't fit that box. Like I don't qualify,
Right.
like even though these things are true, I don't qualify, like I'm not this way. And so I think there's also like a piece here, like if you see any of this, like there's no police that are going to be like, no, you have to check all these boxes. Like
Right.
if it feels like a helpful identity to be like, yes, I'm highly sensitive, yes, I'm an
Uh-huh.
empath, like 100% bring it on. But to me, I've always likened it to sort of living life with like an extra level to it. Like, not only do I see things, I also very strongly feel things. And
Right.
so it's that kind of like notice. And like, I also, for people, it might be like ending up being very sensitive to what's happening around you.
Mhm.
I recall how difficult it was for me to like take my dog on walks in downtown San Francisco
Mm.
because it was like, okay, I had to work so hard on that because it was like there were car noises, there were people, there were smells, the
Yeah.
dog was pulling, like
Right.
I was hungry, like all of these things. And so it's sort of
Yeah.
like just having this like turned up to 11 kind of experience of emotions, of things like that. I
Mhm.
also really feel it like there's almost this like inability to like not care. Like once you've
Mm.
decided to care about something, like it's hard to turn that off. And it's hard to like turn off feelings.
Mhm.
Like, oh man, I can't remember how many people told me, like, you gotta watch Game of Thrones, you gotta watch
Oh
to get watching
gosh.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I tried,
Yeah.
but like it like haunted me. Like I had dreams.
Oh
I
wow.
just like felt it. Like I could
Yeah.
not watch it. I was like, this is not an enjoyable experience. Or like,
Yes. Yeah.
more power to like the true crime fans of the
Right.
world.
Totally.
Like something for me, like my brain just can't, it like grabs it and like freaks out.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
that's totally like kind of a thing I see with it too, is it's just this like my brain, my heart, my body just like
Yeah.
feels it and takes it on.
Yep.
And so yeah, that's kind of, those are some of the like major identifiers I
Yeah.
really see for it. Yeah, just that like sensitivity to just kind of really feel what's happening around
Yeah.
you.
So it's almost like you take in so much information that you just get
Mhm.
overstimulated. It's too much.
Yeah, yeah, like before I knew I was an empath, like as a child, it was just like my mom and I were recently talking about this, like I worried about everything. I
Mm.
would wake her up in the middle of the night worried about like where stray animals go when it rains. And
Oh,
like I would like see a person like on crutches and I would be like, "Oh my gosh, like they must hurt, like they must be in pain." I would see like I just like I couldn't like if the news was on, my parents would like change the channel if I came into the room because it was just like I couldn't take it. I
yeah.
remember like learning about topics in school and just like having a really like, okay, we're talking about this, and I'm like feeling these big feelings. And so that was also like I really knew it from like then I didn't have the words for it,
Right.
but yeah, it's just that like my heart was too big, too
Yeah.
big for me to know what to do with. I
Right.
forgot where I was going with that train of thought, but I feel like there was a question there and I missed it. But
No, no, you're perfect. We were just talking about how you like being that sensitive person. It's like you're so open and you receive such big emotions. And it was like,
yeah.
yeah, like my husband watched this one movie. I actually really think Adam Sandler is really funny, but he has
Hmm.
this one movie where he's got like a diamond that he's selling and it's awful. Like my husband
Hmm.
watched the whole thing, but like watching people make decisions that
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
that are to their detriment in a
Right.
movie for entertainment. I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like,
Like,
it's too much. Like I can't separate the fact that he's not a real person.
right.
And I had to
Totally.
stop the movie. Like,
Yeah. Like, I'm gonna just go.
yeah,
Totally. Totally.
yeah,
And like, it's so beautiful too, because I feel like sometimes I'm able to like connect with something in like a really passionate way. But
yeah,
then, yeah, other times I'm like, this is too much. I
yeah,
gotta go. Like certain songs, I'm like, nope, we're gonna skip that one.
yeah.
Certain movies, I'm like, that one's not for me. Like,
Yeah.
I just have learned my limits.
I have so many things to say to this.
Mhm.
One, just really quickly on that topic, is that I love that you know that about yourself because I
Yeah.
feel like there's this quality, especially among women, I think, that's like, oh, we're too sensitive.
Mhm.
And to be able to honor that sensitivity as not a curse
Right.
or, not being on my period, right? But just like
Right.
a general, like, I am a sensitive
Yeah. I'm
person
just a
and I
weepy
feel
human.
things
I
deeply,
just
right?
cry a lot. And
And
like,
that's okay,
yeah,
right?
totally.
And to make space for like that whole spectrum of being human. I
Mhm.
love that you really own and honor that and
Thank
celebrate that.
you. Yeah,
Um,
I love the counterbalance too because I also am a competitive weightlifter and spend a lot of time like with a barbell in my hands and like it's all about the balance, but I feel like that allows me to be so sensitive in some ways because I'm just like I know how strong I am and like I have that level of worthiness of just like yeah, this is
yeah, it's
just
such a good
how I operate.
duality.
Hmm?
It's a great duality,
Yeah.
right? Like the sensitivity and then the strength.
Yeah.
I love that. I'm curious when you were talking, like, do you feel like you've seen people who are like highly sensitive as kids and then they kind of create this outside kind of coding of strength and kind of stoicism and like
Mhm.
detachment in a way of kind of keeping themselves safe, like this adaptation
Mhm.
of safety. And so then as an adult, we might be like, I'm not sensitive, I'm super strong, I'm super tough,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
how to like is there that kind of progression too, or do you find that people who are highly sensitive continue to kind of stay connected to that part of themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really, like person to person, people will kind of find their ways. But I know like a great example is I think about my father. And my father, he and I were extremely incredibly close. Our birthdays were 2 days apart. He passed away in 2016, and we just like we had a beautiful relationship. And he was super sensitive. He
Mm.
was very sensitive, but he also was like very externally tough.
Right.
Like all my friends were like, I'm scared of your dad. Like he has a big beard, he has big glasses, he has long hair, he just like looks tough. But
Yeah.
then he would like, that's I think my huge heart definitely kind of came. Both of my parents are extremely loving, but like my dad, would like one time there's a story he and my mom were on a date and he like noticed a fly like stuck in a spider web outside and like went out and like took the fly out,
Oh
but
my.
then came in and had this like existential crisis about like, but now the spider can't eat and like was dealing with that. But it's just like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like that's why I'm worried about stray animals and thunderstorms. Like no wonder. But he grew up in, he was born in the like right before in the 60s and in 59 and like kind of grew up with this like tough mentality. Like you
Mhm.
can't be sensitive, you have to be, you know manly and all of
Right.
this stuff. And so I think he really like hid a lot of that.
Yeah.
Um and when we do that, like I think there's like that misalignment with ourselves. And
Uh-huh.
so I think, the body, I don't know if it'll necessarily come out as like a strength thing where you like really get into kind of finding that, but I think like it has to become this mindset of like, or you can use your sensitivities as like a superpower
Uh-huh.
when you like see how powerful they make you.
Uh-huh.
And so like if that,
Right.
like I was a child who was super sensitive for a long time. I was like, well, I'm just going to be an anxious human for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But then I kind of learned how to like navigate and be like, oh, I know that Facebook makes me anxious, so I just don't make myself go on Facebook.
Right.
Like now I'm able to like
Yeah.
respond to myself
Yeah.
because of like a self-awareness piece of just like learning to say like, well, this is I guess who I am. The same thing happened with my height. I'm 5 foot tall.
Uh-huh.
And for the longest time I was like, I'm gonna get taller. I'm gonna get taller. I'm gonna get taller. And it was finally when I was like 25, I was like, I'm gonna get taller. And it was just like I had this realization that was also kind of around the same time too with my sensitivity, where it was just like, what if I just say this is who I am
Mhm.
and like love myself that way? What
Yeah.
if we just try that?
Right.
And
What if?
um that kind of, I think when you find that, like, yeah, that's how you can kind of make it work for you.
Yeah. I love that. I love that on so many levels of like just how about we try loving ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So I feel like we talked about this a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of kind of highlighting it for the people watching, what would be like being supportive and caring
Mm-hmm.
about people and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to love on them and anticipate their needs and give, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an adaptation to some degree, like where we do it to help ourselves feel safe, to help us feel
Mm-hmm.
connected to the person.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, like I know in my experience, what I would do is I would make sure that other people's needs were met so that I felt like they were in a good mood and in a space to then I
Mm-hmm.
could then get my needs met.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Mm-hmm.
like this specific way that we kind of, do the dance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would be some reasons why that particular dance isn't in service to us?
Yeah. Yep. So I have a phrase I like to use for that dance. I like to call it defensive niceness.
Yeah.
And this stems from I think a lot of where like people pleasing comes from. This is like kind of the science of it, I guess, is there's this concept called emotophobia, which
Hmm.
is the fear of negative emotions.
Interesting.
And so it's that like, oh, I'm gonna be like extra nice to this person, I'm gonna clean the whole house. I'm gonna make it so beautiful that so that when, they get home, I can ask them for, a little bit of money.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Or like I'm going to, call this person on their birthday and like really, show up for them because I want them to like me.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Yeah.
like I will let her choose the restaurant because what if I get it wrong and like she hates it and there's nothing she can eat?
Right.
And like it's kind of that like okay, how do I like keep everything calm? And the real kicker there is that that is actually like manipulation
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. It's like very much like, okay, I'm exerting some kind of control over this to keep it in what I can handle. And so I really see kind of the emotions that like keep us in that is actually like that. How do I like avoid
Yep.
conflict? Or like, how do I, you know, avoid them saying anything awkward to me? How do I avoid them, you know, from like talking about me? Like, how do I avoid all of that? And so that's kind of where I really see like that's also kind of the distinction I see between like just being like a kind person
Mm-hmm.
versus being like a nice person who's like
Mm-hmm.
doing it a little bit more like nice. I'm trying to be like pleasing to you. I'm maybe putting you first. Whereas, like, yeah, you can totally call your friend on her birthday. That's a great thing to do. And like,
Right.
if you're doing that from the kindness of your heart, from this place of like, yeah, let's, continue the relationship. I love her. I want her to know how special she is today
Yeah.
that way. But if it's rooted in that, like, because I want her to like me, or
Right.
like, because I want them, like, that's how you kind of identify like, ooh, this is a people pleasing behavior versus like, I'm
Yeah.
just a loving human.
Right.
Because for so long I was like, I'm just nice. And it was like, okay, suddenly I'm helping everybody move. I'm volunteered for every committee at church. I'm watching everybody's kids. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wait a second. And then I
Oh.
realized like, oh, maybe I'm just saying yes to everything because like I want them to like me.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And what, so this actually is another thing I wanted to ask you about,
Mhm.
which is perfect. Like, so you find yourself saying yes to everything. And now we
Mhm.
can see the detriment of like why we wouldn't necessarily want to engage in that behavior. But
Mhm.
engaging in that, what did you find it brought up? Like, did it bring up, were you just depleted, overwhelmed, anxious? Like,
Yeah.
where was your limit? Like, at what point were you like, I
Yeah.
can't do this anymore? Like,
Totally. Totally. So I think for me, it really was kind of that moment of realization of like, I'm telling myself other people are better than me.
right.
Like, I am giving them that message when I put them first, when I don't set the boundary, when I let them, have conversations that make me uncomfortable, when I just brush it off.
Mhm.
And so it was kind of a slew of those things where I really sort of realized like, wait a second, this is who I am. Like, I am my own companion for life. I want to be able to like look myself in the eye, look at myself in the mirror and just be like, you're doing the very best you can. And like, you stood up for us today. And like, I want to be able to have that relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I see myself kind of, putting other people first, really not being in my own light, it's that kind of that all summed up into this like, okay, something has to change here. Like
Yeah.
I have to I don't want it like it was also kind of this realization too, like I very much grew up with a strong concept of God and a strong concept of like there's something bigger, we all have a purpose.
Mhm.
And I came across this, like I saw it somewhere online, but it was this whole piece that like God doesn't make extra people. And
Oh.
like everybody is here for some kind of purpose. And
Uh-huh.
then I kind of expanded my spirituality into like, what if I chose to come here? Like, what
Mm.
if I'm actually here for some kind of something? And like, ooh, that feels good. That feels exciting. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And so,
Yeah.
like, then once all of that kind of came together, it was like, okay, so if I'm on a mission from God and like this person over here thinks it's weird, like, why on earth would I listen to them when
Right.
like God and I got something great over here? And
Totally.
so I've just had to like keep
Totally.
coming back to that side.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that was kind of that like, okay,
I love
I'm
that.
here for something bigger,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
final straw.
Yeah. I love that because it reminds me of, so I went to this meditation school for years,
Mhm.
and the guy who started it wrote all these books, and it was kind of like, it was almost like, it's like a story almost like Lord of the Rings, you know, like this, like,
Mhm.
it's like just really soaked in symbolism and
Mhm.
otherworldly, but it was like literally the progression of consciousness. And
Mm.
so there was this one part where the main character went down into the underworld
Mhm.
and had to walk through what they called the caverns of sickness.
Mm.
And it was a part of like a ritual or an initiation. And what was so interesting that really stuck out, which is so similar to what you just said, is that along this path, it's like the essence of being in your shadow, right? The essence of being in those dark, murky spaces of your own internal landscape, and your fears and your doubts and your anxieties and
Mhm.
depression, like all of it in this dark space. And at
Mhm.
one point, he saw this beam of light coming down from connection, coming down from the divine, the universe, like whatever, like this Holy Spirit, right? And he realized that nothing out here mattered. It was this
Mhm.
connection. It was this
Mhm.
agreement that he had to fulfill in this incarnation. This
Wow.
like, and it gave him the power and the strength to just continue walking, because that was kind of the mission. You just keep walking, don't stop.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it really stuck with me because I feel like on my own journey of healing from people pleasing, it
Mhm.
helped me say like, well, what's my mission here?
Mhm.
Right? Like, what am I here to do? What's my superpower? What's my truth? What's my
Mhm.
rawness? What's my wildness that wants to come out? Because all that
Mhm.
matters is me and the connection to that.
Right.
Right. And people are going to have their own experiences about it. Some will think I'm cool. Some will think I'm weird. Some will think I've lost
Mhm.
it. Some will think I'm onto something, like, or
Mhm.
on something.
Yeah, I
Right.
was gonna say on something or onto something.
Yeah.
Yep, they'll all think what they think.
Right. But none of it matters because when I'm connected to myself and the energy at large, like,
Mhm.
I feel completely at home,
Oh, yes.
right?
100%.
So I love that. Like, that's been one huge resource for me and kind of coming back to
That
that.
sounds like an amazing journey.
Oh,
I'm
oh,
deeply curious about this book. Or
they're so good. I will happily tell you about them. They're amazing. I mean, that even start. I mean, I won't go into it
yep.
because I'll end up talking for like
Yep.
way
Yep.
too
We'll
long.
circle back after. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Um, So just wanted to go back to my questions because I didn't want to miss anything because I feel like you and I could just talk like free
Mhm.
form
Mhm.
forever. Um, okay. I'm curious because we've kind of covered what it means to be highly sensitive, what it means to be a people pleaser, the importance of coming home to ourselves and really honoring that. And you do a lot of work with supporting people in establishing real world tools.
Mhm.
You support them in energy work, mindset work. Like,
Mhm.
what are just a few nuggets that you could share that
Yeah.
would support people in kind of having the courage to look at themselves in this new way?
Yeah, totally. Ooh, yes. So that's kind of like for so long I like came at this work from different directions where
Mhm.
I was like doing therapy stuff to work on my mindset and I would nourish my body and body image and like physical form and I was just getting into like energy and spirit kind of stuff with starting to meditate and once I kind of realized like wait a second when I put all of these things together of like healing the beliefs in my mindset
Uh-huh.
like healing my energetic body to feel confident and then also having like statements at the ready to say if somebody's giving me unsolicited advice that I don't want like having kind of my go-to no thank you I'm not interested kind of comments
Right.
and so I've kind of put all of those together so kind of the piece I see with the kind of a tip for each is like with the mindset piece, it's really all about your self-image and like your worthiness. And so, kind of, and we were talking about the shadow stuff, like if there's a piece of you that is lingering and is like, but I don't actually feel worthy,
Mm-hmm.
then like okay maybe there's something that you need to forgive yourself for maybe
Mm-hmm.
there's like some belief shifting about how the world works that like could happen. And so really tuning into that, like, do I truly see myself? I like to say, like, as Lizzo sees herself. Like, Lizzo
Uh-huh.
is like so confident and bold and just like in her power that it's like, yeah, I want to love myself like Lizzo loves herself. Like,
Yeah.
am I in that? And so if you're like, maybe I'm not, like, okay, start there, like figure out what that like mindset piece is.
Uh-huh.
Um, then with this kind of like energy piece, like for people, I always talk about like if you're going into a conversation where you're, not feeling super confident, you're maybe feeling like, oh, this is going to be like an awkward conversation, all of that, like you don't want to bring that energy with you to it. Like you might have this awareness of like, ooh, yeah, this might be a little bit of a tricky situation, but it's like, okay, that gives you knowledge of like, cool. So I want to make sure that I'm really grounded. I want to make
Mhm.
sure that like I feel prepared for that conversation. I
Yeah.
want to make sure I have time for that conversation. So
Mhm.
just kind of before you go into it, you like put on this energetic confidence of like, okay, maybe you ground yourself into the earth, or you pray to God, or you ask angels to be with you, or kind of
Mhm.
all of those tools. Like you can really take that into that boundary setting.
Mhm.
And then with the real life stuff, like I think it's just kind of putting those pieces together and then practicing, like
Mhm.
saying things.
Mhm.
In one of my programs, I used to do conversation labs where we
Uh-huh.
could like practice that of
Yeah.
like, okay, I always give in on sales calls and like end up not charging enough. And it's like, okay, let's have a totally safe conversation where, you are committed to this price. I
Uh-huh.
might kind of try to push a little bit, but like, I
Right.
won't, and it's just like a safe way to kind of practice saying like, unfortunately, I'm not available to work for that price. My minimum is 500 a month.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps I could refer you to some of these resources.
Yeah.
And it's like, cool. Once you know what you're saying, once you've said it a couple times,
Yeah.
like it's beautiful. So there's like that preparation piece can always go so far because then you can come into it just with this like, oh, I got
Mhm.
this. Like, what's the best that could happen? We can like
Mm.
transform this relationship for the better. Like, this is going to be great. And it
Yeah.
like totally shifts the vibe. You're not going into it like, oh, they're going to be mad at me, or like, oh, I can't believe I have to ask for this, or like,
Yeah.
don't take that person with you. Like, that person exists. Let that version of you like be heard in your preparation process. But
Yep.
then, like, when you're having the conversation,
Yeah.
like, power self.
Yeah. 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 I love that. Like where you're like, because that's kind of going into like parts work, right? And
Mhm.
character work, where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, there's this part of me that feels really nervous and anxious about
Yeah,
how
my
this
like
is
ego
happening,
side I always see is like,
right? Yeah, like there's that part. But then by even just noticing it, you become the witness to it, which makes you not that part.
right.
So it's like, okay, I see you. Because I love that you said that, because there was this one time I was like sending an email to somebody. Actually, I take that back. I had signed up for a class, and this part of me was terrified that I signed up for the class and I was going to be like, I wasn't at the level I should be for the class. Like I was like they were more advanced or further along than me, and I was going to get in there and I was going to feel like an idiot. And so this
Mhm.
part of me was like, you need to email the person and make sure that you're going to that it's okay. And the other
Mm.
part of me was like witnessing, and I was like, okay, I hear your fear, I hear your
Mhm.
concern. What do you need from me in this moment?
Mhm.
And this little girl part of me was like, I just really want you to email her and just ask her this question. And I was
Mhm.
like, I can do that for you.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I
Yeah.
emailed and it was fine, right? And then I showed up to the class
Mhm.
in my power self, because like,
Yeah.
so I love that you specifically said like acknowledge them in the preparation,
Mhm.
but then show up
Yeah,
as the power self. Like
for
I
sure.
really love that, because it feels like that part needs to be acknowledged, right? It
Totally.
has to be
Yeah, and if you just like tamp it down, like
yeah,
that doesn't end well.
right.
Like you
Right.
end up throwing an internal tantrum because you're like, I haven't been listened to.
Yeah, or
And
you're like sweating and you're anxious
yeah,
because it's like you haven't
totally.
integrated that part.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I last things, I know we've kind of
Mhm.
been chatting for a while. And I want to you do a lot of stuff, even with like Reiki, and you were doing Akashic records for a while. Like, are you like, do you kind of like wrap all of this stuff together? Like I'm
Totally.
curious, like, how do you work with your clients? And
Mhm.
do you pull in all of these different resources as a part of working with empaths and
Yeah,
highly sensitive people?
totally. So I have like kind of the intensive level, like one-off experience for folks where we just do Reiki sessions, or we maybe do like Reiki and a reading. Um, if something is, like you feel like there's more work to be done, then I do have a like longer term one-on-one program, Burnt Out to Bright Light, that
Mm,
kind of incorporates that, like, okay, I always see it as like kind of the belief work. We're doing
mhm,
some Reiki work. We're
mhm,
like navigating real life situations.
mhm,
I'm there to like help you stay in that power.
mhm,
And so I totally put it all together in that way.
mhm.
But I also just really love kind of the like, situational stuff with people of like, I don't know why this bothered me so much. Like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's kind of like navigate, maybe there was that version of you that wasn't feeling heard. And so like once we identify that of like, okay, cool, let's hop into some Reiki real quick and like send some Reiki back to that little girl version and like
Yeah,
just give her some healing. And then, we can jump back into the
love
next
that.
part or maybe do a card reading. I just love having all of these tools at
Mhm.
the ready because they've also been very transformative for me in my own journey. Because sometimes, yeah, we're like working through a people pleasing situation and you're like starting to notice like, wait a second, this shows up a ton of places in my life. And it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, great question for the Akashic records. Let's hop
Oh,
over and like tune into like, why this pattern like repeats for you.
oh, I
And it's just
love that.
like we can do both.
Oh
And
my God.
I'm so excited. I'm starting a tapping certification next month.
Yes, I
So then I'm
love
going to bring
tapping.
EFT into it because that's also
Big.
like
So
been
big.
hugely transformational for me in my own like rewriting some limiting
Yeah.
beliefs. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just love kind of meeting with people around boundaries, around people pleasing, and then kind of just really seeing what is necessary for the situation. I do a lot of like customized, like one-on-one kind of things of like maybe we just do like a 6-week Reiki
Uh-huh.
thing where we're like kind of talking about like people pleasing at work, or like maybe we're doing a longer term thing and it's like about relationships because you're dating and you like can't seem
Right.
to like stand
Right.
in your power and you always end up with these like situation that you don't want to be in, and like, okay, let's work around that. So I
Yeah.
really love kind of bringing what people need and then just having that like, let's do some Reiki around this, let's do
Yeah.
some let's pull a card, let's see what, you
Love
know
that.
nonviolent communication, like let's see what the kind of frameworks of like
Yeah.
that have to say. So it's really, yeah, the mix of all of them is my favorite way to work with people.
Yeah. I love that. My whole body's like, yes, yes, yes. Like, I love the pulling from different
Mhm.
resources because like that's the ultimate goal of the rooted experience is to
Mhm.
create this tribe of humans that support and nourish the world through a variety of modalities because there's not just one way.
Totally.
Right? Like you go to someone and they do mindset coaching, that's beautiful, but
Mhm.
it's not going to help you get into your body and like move
Right.
energy, right? Like
Mhm.
there's so many different ways that I feel like all work together. Like at this like this spider web
Mhm.
of working together. And the other thing that I love that I just love your energy. I love your voice. I love your presence. And it reminded me of like when I was learning my own role with people pleasing. One of my therapists at the time was like, you have to get comfortable displeasing people.
Mhm.
And that hurt. I was like,
Mhm.
displeasing people. And so I
Mhm.
actually like spoke it to my husband. I was like, I want to let you know I'm going to practice displeasing you. Right? Like and like
Mhm.
almost like laying the groundwork.
Mhm.
And it was great. He's like, okay. Like, cause then he knew it was coming. And
Yeah.
I had that permission to explore
Right.
like things that were really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so I
Ooh.
really feel that like with the container you create, like the
Mhm.
safe space for people to come and be honest about the things that are coming up for them and being able
Totally.
to work through them in a way that doesn't, in their minds, create harm to their
Yeah,
relationships.
totally. Ooh, yes. One of my clients and I really did a lot to reclaim being high maintenance
Oh,
because she
yeah.
was like, I kind of want to be high maintenance. I was
Yeah.
like, me too. That's okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not harming anyone, but like we did totally some work around like, okay, what would my high maintenance self like do in this situation? What
Yeah.
would that version of me want? Like, how do I honor that version? And just like,
Yeah.
but kind of standing in that and like letting yourself be
Yeah.
that version. It's a lot sometimes. So
Yeah. Totally. Oh
mm,
my gosh, we have to do this
mhm,
again because this has just
totally.
been so much fun. We will be sharing the video, we'll be sharing the audio, we'll have everything typed up in a transcript for people to read. And again, in all of that information, you'll have access to Allison's website, her Instagram, and you
Mhm.
have a quiz, right? So,
Yeah, we've been talking a ton about people pleasing, and I didn't give any of this away, but I actually see four different types of people pleasing, and I break it down. And so I have a quiz about what keeps you people pleasing.
oh,
Is it, avoiding conflict? Is it overachieving? Is it doubting in yourself? Like all of this kind of stuff.
interesting.
And so if you're interested in kind of learning and naming that version of people pleasing for you a bit, I have a quiz on my website. It's in the footer and it's also thegroundedempath.com/quiz.
Mhm.
And if you sign up to get the little like email after it, you get an email that has a meditation, a guided meditation for healing your people pleasing at the deepest level. It's like a 15-minute meditation where we kind of really get into that like emotional self and do some of that like really transformational work. So if you're interested in that, it is a great
Yeah,
resource that exists on my website and can help you
awesome.
learn a bit about yourself as a people pleaser.
Yeah, we will definitely put that down below in the content for people to access because I feel like that's really important. I feel like this is like one of the most important steps on coming home to yourself.
Yeah.
So,
And I love that phrase. I would love to just add this in here. This quote like has directed my life.
mhm.
I'm sure many listeners and yourself included, like probably are familiar with Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's right next to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a quote in there where she says, she's talking about Wild Woman, and she says, she's who we leave home to look for, and she's who we come home to.
I love that.
Oh,
Oh,
she's
that's
who
so
we
true.
leave home to look for and who we come home to. Mm,
I'm gonna leave it.
medicine.
Yeah. I'm gonna end us there because that's powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Allison, for being
You're
here with
so
us.
welcome. This was
And
delightful.
it was so fun. And I will see all of you in the next interview.